All right, today we're going to dig into a UK Supreme Court case that you might have missed. It didn't really make a lot of flashy headlines, but trust me, it's a case that's all about protecting a right so fundamental that it impacts every single one of us, our right to be heard in court. So let's just start with a really big question. Can the government just decide that certain people don't get their day in court? That's the incredibly high-stakes issue right at the heart of this whole story. To really get what happened here, we've first got to talk about a really key tool for fairness in the justice system. And that tool is legal aid. Simply put, it's public money that helps people who can't afford a lawyer get the advice and the representation they need. The whole idea is built on this principle that the kind of justice you get shouldn't depend on how much money you have. A great way to think about it is like this. For a huge number of people, the courtroom door is basically locked. Legal aid is the key that opens it up, making sure that when things go really wrong, everybody gets a fair shot at being heard. So that's the setup. But here's where the problem starts. A few years back, the government decided it wanted to change the rules on who exactly could get their hands on that key. They came up with this thing called the residence test. And on the surface, it sounded pretty straightforward, but its consequences were absolutely enormous. Okay, so under the old rule, getting legal aid was based on two things. Did your case have merit? And did you have the financial means to pay for a lawyer yourself? But this new rule added a massive third hurdle. You also had to prove you'd been legally living in the UK for at least the past year. So who would this new rule lock out? I mean, the list is just staggering when you look at it. We're talking about victims of human trafficking, kids who had just arrived in the UK, grieving families who needed help with an inquest, and get this, even British citizens who had just moved back home after living somewhere else. So you see, this was way more than just a debate about policy. This was setting the stage for a major battle over the UK's unwritten constitution, a real constitutional clash. And this is where our David versus Goliath story really kicks off. A legal charity called the Public Law Project stepped into the ring. They saw this residence test and knew it was a direct challenge to a core principle, so they decided to take the government to court. And the principle they were fighting for was the rule of law. It's a fancy term, but the idea is actually super simple. Nobody is above the law. Not me, not you, and not even the government. It's like having a referee in a game, just making sure everyone plays fair. So everything really boiled down to this one critical question that the courts had to answer. Did a government minister really have the power to just create a rule that slams the courtroom door shut for a whole group of people? And a question this fundamental, this big? Well, there was only one place it was ever going to end up: the Supreme Court. So after years of legal wrangling, the case finally landed at the UK Supreme Court. And honestly, everything was on the line. So you've got the 9 most senior judges in the country, and they've all gathered to answer that one single question. Was the residence test lawful? And their answer, which was unanimous, by the way, was a huge, resounding no. They decided the government had completely overstepped its authority. And their reasoning really gets to the very heart of the matter. Lord Reed, one of the judges, basically said that access to the courts isn't just a nice-to-have. It's a fundamental constitutional right. And a right that important can't just be taken away by a minister changing a rule. To do something that drastic, it would require an explicit act of Parliament. Let's just break down their logic, because it's really clear. Step 1? Sure, the government can set rules for how legal aid works. No problem there. Step 2? But, and this is the critical part, that power isn't unlimited. It can't be used to create a rule that just blocks people's fundamental right to get to court. And why not? That's step 3. Because doing that attacks the very foundation of the rule of law itself. Okay, so a legal charity wins a court case. Why should you care? Well, because the impact of this decision, the ripples from it, go way beyond that courtroom. The legacy of this case is just huge. It drew a clear line in the sand, confirming that access to justice is a right, not a privilege. It put a hard limit on government power, reminding them that they aren't all powerful. It also protected the vital role of the courts as a check on that power. And most importantly, it ensured that the key to the courtroom remains available to everyone, no matter who they are or how long they've lived here. So at the end of the day, this was never just some dry, technical legal argument. It was a passionate and frankly a necessary defense of a core democratic principle.
that the government has to be accountable to its people through the courts, and that process of accountability has to be open to absolutely everyone.
And it leaves us with this final crucial question to think about. In a healthy democracy, what is and what should be the ultimate check on government power? This case gives us one heck of a powerful answer. Thanks for joining us.